So mesh analysis is simply an extension of KVL. Okay, KVL simply says that the sum of all the voltage gains is equal to the sum of all the voltage drops in a closed loop in a closed circuit. Okay, mesh analysis is not directly given in the FE Reference Handbook. Mesh analysis has a stepwise methodology towards solving it, and there are two steps in here that are extremely important. And if you just get those two steps right, I can assure you that your odds of solving a problem using mesh analysis are going to be through the roof. Okay, so first of all, I'll let you know upfront, my personal go-to circuit analysis technique is not mesh analysis. Okay, my personal recommended technique for all of my FE electrical students, my P power students, is KCL. All right, there are certain circuits that can be easily solved with mesh analysis, much more easily than KCL. And there are certain circuits that can be more easily solved by KCL. But KCL is by far the most robust, the most versatile, and the most effective circuit analysis technique that can rescue you in any situation. All the other circuit analysis techniques, whether you're talking about superposition, whether you're talking about mesh analysis, whether you're talking about Thevenin, Norton, source transformation, anything else, is basically going to require an optimized circuit. Okay, a circuit that is sort of tailor-made for that particular technique. But KCL, and I'm sort of playing down mesh analysis in this lecture, in this discussion, and talking up KCL, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea as to what is by far the single most effective and helpful circuit analysis techniques, and that is not mesh analysis, that is KCL, in my humble opinion. Okay, so these are the steps. We have to establish how many mesh and loops we need to write, identify the mesh, so typically assign the mesh currents or assign the subscripts and the direction, identify all the known currents. In some cases, you may be able to look at the loop and there might be a current source, and that would basically be the, depending on how that current source is organized, established, you'll be able to see what the current in the loop is going to be. Then find the unknown currents and write the KVL equation. So as I said, the mesh analysis is essentially building on top of our KVL, replace voltages in terms of mesh current. So this is our KVL analysis from this point onwards. Then we are solving for the unknown currents and then the voltages. And once you've solved all the unknown currents and all the unknown voltages, you've solved every single thing in the circuit. Because if you're looking at a power equation, you can, across a resistor, for example, it would be I squared R, or it would be V squared divided by R. As long as you know I and you know V for the entire circuit, it is going to be a slam dunk from that point onwards. Okay, so we can do a lot of talking looking at these steps, but I suggest that we dive into a practical example to help ourselves understand this concept much more clearly. The two steps, the two things that you must take away, and if these are the only two things that you take away from this webinar, right, from this discussion, I'll consider my job done. The first one is that you have to assume same direction for all the loops, all the mesh current loops. Okay, either assume clockwise or counterclockwise for each and every one of them. Most of the textbooks assume clockwise, right? But what you don't want to do is you don't want to assume counterclockwise for one and clockwise for the other. If you look at the FE Reference Handbook, first of all, mesh is not even mentioned. Since it is not mentioned, you're not going to have any discussion about it, right? And same is true for P power. But this is something that even a lot of folks who are going through Circuits 101, Circuits Part 1, Circuits Part 2 in their undergraduate engineering coursework, they get into the FE exam preparation. I see them making this mistake all the time when they're doing my quizzes, my homework assignment, my mini exams, my computer simulated practice exams, or study guide problem sets. So please don't make this mistake. I'm going to repeat it one more time. The direction of the current for both loops, if you have to establish it, or if there are three loops, if you have to establish it yourself, by all means set it counterclockwise or clockwise. But the direction has to be the same for all the currents. Make sense? Don't do half and half. That's one. And the second thing has to do with the handling of the current in the middle branch. And for that, we actually have to set up our KVL equation. The KVLs are fairly simple. The sum of all the voltage gains, but the voltage plus the voltage drops is always going to be equal to 0. But how do we handle the middle branch over here is the next question. Okay. So let us write the KVL for our loop number 1, assuming that we are moving in a clockwise direction for both of the loops. And then naming these properly is also important. You can use different subscripts 1, 2, 3, 4 or A, B, C. Just stay consistent and don't confuse yourself while you're analyzing the circuit. There is a concept related to passive sign convention that comes into play when we are dealing with KVL. I1 is actually circulating through this loop. Whenever we encounter a resistor, there is only going to be voltage drop when we are dealing with resistors. Resistors can never give you voltage gain. So this is very easy. The way I recommend my students to write these equations is to collect all the voltage gains on one side and voltage drops on one side. So right now what we see over here is a summation of all the voltage drops on the right hand side, and this is a sum of all the voltage gains on the left hand side. Now the voltage source is actually a tricky business, because for voltage sources we need to remember our passive sign convention. Again, not explicitly mentioned in the FE Reference Handbook or the P-Power Reference Handbook. What is that passive sign convention? The passive sign convention says that a voltage source, okay, is going to act as a voltage gain in the circuit if current enters the negative terminal and leaves the positive terminal. Okay, you're going to see this distinction in this circuit in just 2 minutes. Current I1 is entering the negative terminal of the battery, leaving the positive terminal of the battery. So the 45 volt is going to qualify as a V gain. Okay, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to jump one step ahead. Current I2 is entering the positive terminal. So current I2 is actually doing this. This is I2, right? And this is my I1. When the current enters the positive terminal and leaves the negative terminal, that is going to be a voltage drop. The knee-jerk reaction, the intuitive interpretation by most of the students is that I'm seeing a 30 volt source, so it's a voltage gain because it's a source of voltage. It's a DC battery, right? What else can a DC battery do other than just boosting the voltage in the circuit? Wrong. What depends is the direction of the current. Okay, so this will be treated as a voltage gain. I am going to throw 45 volts over here, and the product of I1 times 4 ohms over here on the right hand side, voltage drop, the product of I1 times I2 over here as a voltage drop. Okay, what happens to the middle branch? Because when I look at the middle circuit, right, middle branch, I have I1 coming in from the top of into the resistor and I2 entering the bottom. Okay, hopefully this is already clarifying a few doubts that you guys probably had with regards to mesh analysis or general circuit analysis, this passive sign convention, and how we basically set up the voltage gains and the voltage drops. So how should I write the voltage drop across the 12 ohm? I know for a fact that it is going to end up on the right hand side of the equation, because when we are dealing with resistors, we always have voltage drops. There are two ways to write this. The resistor value 2 ohms multiplied by the current, but how should I write the current? The current is being subtracted, right? Should I write as I1 minus I2, or should I write it I2 minus I1? This is the next major point of failure in mesh analysis. Because if you have not consciously thought this through during your exam preparation and understood the underlying concept, chances are that you're going to take an ad hoc approach. And from this point, two paths diverge. One is going to use this approach. Sorry. One is going to use the I1 minus I2 approach, right? And the other one is I2 minus I1 approach. And only one of them is right. So technically you are, if you don't have a solid understanding, you're reducing chances of scoring a point on this question by 50% while you're doing KVL for loop number 1. Does it make sense? You can be doing the entire analysis correctly based on your assumption, based on your understanding, putting in 3, 4, 5 minutes, 6 minutes of your time into this problem, and maybe even selecting A, B, C, D, one of the options will be correct because they might have implanted an incorrect answer based on this mistake as one of the options. And it may give you a warm and fuzzy feeling walking out of the exam that, every single question that I selected for circuit analysis had an option in A, B, C, D, but then you may end up underperforming on circuit analysis because they baked in. And this is such a common mistake. Now, having helped hundreds of students over the years, I know that this is one of the main reasons why students mess up mesh analysis. So it's not that difficult to incorporate. Anyways, so which one should I use? I1 minus I2 or I2 minus I1? The answer lies in recognizing which loop equation you are using or writing for. I am writing the equation for I1. When I write the equation for I1, I'm going to treat I1 as the more dominant current, and I'm going to take the difference I1 minus I2. Make sense? Not mentioned in the handbook. All right. This is only something that when you are aspiring for level 3 understanding, which is beyond just definitions and formulas and equations and numericals, that's when you understand this concept. So this is how my KVL for loop number 1 is going to turn out. Let's move on to loop number 2 equation. In loop number 2, I basically am going to end up with a voltage drop for my 9 ohm resistor because across the resistors, we always have voltage drops. Same thing for the 3 ohm resistor. And even in the case of the 30 volt source, as I just mentioned, because the current is entering the positive terminal, leaving the negative terminal, using the passive sign convention, this actually qualifies as a voltage drop, not a voltage gain. So if I am collecting all the voltage drops on one side of the equation and all the voltage gains on the other side of the equation, I will end up with the 9 ohm times I2 voltage drop. I will end up with 30 volts as a voltage drop and end up with I2 times 3 ohms as a voltage drop. And then I have to now tackle 12 ohms, the middle branch, multiplied by the current that is flowing through it. Since I'm writing the equation for loop 2, I am going to set this up as I2 minus I1. I2 minus I1, not I1 minus I2. I1 minus I2, I did this in my previous equation when I was writing the equation for loop 1. Now I'm writing this as I1 minus I2, right? This is the level 3 stuff. This is the underlying concept. So again, if you think about it, let's say you took a 50-50 approach and you got lucky with I1 minus I2 over here. And you're telling yourself in the exam that, it's always I1 minus I2 because 1 is smaller than 2 or whatever reasoning you make up. If you actually insert I1 minus I2 over here, what's going to happen? You're going to lose the point. So even over here, your chances are being reduced into 50-50. Over here, 50-50. So if you're just relying on ad hoc analysis or ad hoc assumptions, technically 0.5 multiplied by 0.5 gives you 0.25 probability of solving this question despite the fact that you're actually solving this problem, right? You're actually analyzing the circuit. This probability of 25%, guess what? Is the same probability that you would have if you were to not solve this problem and just randomly select an option. Because there are four options, right, in most of the problems. If you are not solving this problem, saving yourself 3 minutes at minimum, and maybe up to 6 minutes if this question is taking longer. And if you were to just randomly select an option, given the fact that you didn't have this understanding, this fine detail, you are basically making as much progress as just randomly selecting one of the options. Does that make sense? Is there any weight in this argument, in this perspective, right? So the point is that having partial understanding, and this is why they say sometimes having partial knowledge is more dangerous than not having not having any knowledge. And this is a perfect example, because if having partial knowledge made you invest 5 to 6 minutes maybe on this problem, because you could do V is equal to IR, basic Ohm's law, and you knew that KVLs had to be written. But if, let's say, the outcome of this analysis, because of lack of level 3 focused fundamental understanding using first principles, was still a miss on this question, I mean, that was actually worse than just randomly selecting an option and getting a miss, because then this did not cost you 5 to 6 minutes on the question. And the outcome was still a zero here, outcome still a zero, but this is actually a preferred outcome. Okay? That's why partial knowledge, partial understanding sometimes can be more problematic. And then I have two equations, two unknown, that is equal to zero over here. So two equations, two unknown, you can plug and check in the calculator, Casio TI-36X Pro, whichever one you want to use. Okay, and these are the answers. So technically in I2, there is actually no current that is flowing, which basically means that this is an open circuit, so it technically doesn't even impact our analysis. And this is just by chance that I2 ended up being zero because of this mathematical solution. And 0 amps means that that branch is not having any current. 0 amps means that it's open circuit. Okay, so these are some of the key points related to mesh analysis. Very quickly, the most important point is to make sure that the direction of the currents are always the same, whether they're clockwise or clockwise. Most textbooks assume clockwise. Number two, when you're writing the KVL equations for the center branch, pay attention to the loop that you're writing it for. If it is for loop 1 associated with current I1, then you're going to do I1 minus I2. If it is for loop 2, then it's associated with I2, it's going to be I2 minus I1. And then you end up with the same number of equations and unknowns, and that should basically allow you to solve the problem. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. On a weekly basis, I'm creating content for FE Electrical and PE Power exam preparation. I also discuss topics related to electrical engineering with a focus on power systems engineering. If you'd like to learn more about my FE Electrical and PE Power exam preparation programs, please visit my website, studyforfe.com.